I don't know about you, but I just love Saturday victories. They set up the entire weekend, don't they? Your Sunday roast hosting is just so much more enjoyable. I've been looking at our Saturday success since Unai Emery arrived. You know, we've won 15 times, lost just 4 times, and drawn the other 2 since he's taken over. Our last Saturday loss was at Newcastle on opening day. And then when you add a Villa victory with your own team's 5-2 win in the derby, oh, well, life is just perfect. Let's review. Villa 4, Nottingham Forest 2. I was very sorry to hear of the passing of Chris Nicholl over the weekend at the age of just 77. By all accounts, quite a gent who represented our club 252 times, scoring 20 times in that 5-year span, but also 51 caps for Northern Ireland, which included the 82 World Cup in Spain. But what I most closely associate with Chris Nicholl is the 1977 League Cup final win over Everton, where he played a huge role, and that seemed to be sort of the start of a revival for Villa because, you know, that 82 group was starting to be assembled and then came along not long after. And I always have so much time for the guys who toiled in the lower leagues or even the non-leagues. I mean, Nicholl joined Aston Villa as a Division 3 team. And so he kind of was part of the revival. And the sad thing for guys like me in my 50s, I've lost all my rock and roll icon legend heroes, but also with footballers, the guys from my young era are stepping off the stage, which is why we need to treasure and revere our club legends. It's my first chance to comment on the Europa Conference League draw, which I think was extremely satisfying from numerous standpoints, starting with the fact that it's not been a great season for Ajax. They are well out of the European places right now. Also, a straightforward travel situation, which might be the most important thing. And we've made that trip already once this season and maybe had our best away performance of the year at a decent Alkmaar side. I think if you ask any professional as well, they will always take the big occasion venue and the big occasion opponent over a lesser one because it's easier to get up for those kinds of games. And if you're a traveling supporter heading to the Johan Cruyff Arena, well, apart from the game, I know you're probably going to be bored to tears because there's, nothing to do in Amsterdam. You're just going to have to get over that. And then just from expanding Aston Villa's profile standpoint, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this particular round and this draw. I mean, Ajax is probably the biggest of the remaining 16 teams along with ourselves. I'd throw Fiorentina in there and maybe even the 2 Greek clubs because how badly will they want to reach that final in their own country? But if Unai Emery's men have legitimate designs on winning this trophy, we're going to have to take on all comers and the big boys. My only concern is the timing of it. Those games are on either side of a huge home contest with Tottenham Hotspur and then heading into an away game at West Ham just before the break. I mean, this stretch could literally help determine which European competition we're playing in next season. Oh, look at that. Villa Park bathed in glorious sunshine. What a sight, and one which I look forward to experiencing again. The Holy Trinity show had its 2 trusty correspondents rolling footage, including Samir, who was sporting his Luke training top from the promotion-winning season. Thanks again, John McGinn. We'll talk about you specifically. And A-Duts, Alex Dutton, put down his guitar, picked up his phone, and his partner, Jess, who has a 100% in-person winning record at Villa Park, as I welcome you officially to the Holy Trinity show, where I look at the 3 big issues or moments that define Villa 4, Forest 2. Touches in the opponent's box was wide in this game, almost 2-1 for Villa. And these numbers indicate it was a wide open game. Look at the respective XG and big chances. We got into some great scoring areas. for those 5 big chances. The opponents also had 7 interceptions and 5 clearances. So if you're like me and you think, based on what you saw, that the scoreline should have been wider, the stats probably support that feeling. Possibly a major issue, debatably even a top 3 type issue, but I think Nuno kind of got his squad selection wrong, and I don't profess to watch Nottingham Forest week in and week out, but it's funny that Ian Wright made similar comments in some of his post-match punditry. It's always a risk when you play a player out of position, and he put Niakate, a center back, naturally, at left back because of the Tavares injury. Revealing then all the halftime subs at 3-1 down, including Toffolo, who is a more natural left back who came in, which is almost an admission of the error for me. And the reason why I think it's fair to call it a mistake is because Leon Bailey might be one of the most informed players in the entire Premier League, and all 3 of our goals originated from our right, Forest's left. The first one, which was, honestly, this could be one of my favorite goals of the year for so many reasons. And I'll talk more specifically about John McGinn in just a moment, but just on this goal, who do you think makes the play? Is it the guy with the ball or without the ball? It's a debate that you hear often in football, but for me, Leon Bailey's position here against the fullback is the cue to play the ball. And of course, you still need a perfectly weighted pass from McGinn, a classic split ball between the center back and the fullback, and he delivers that pass. So Bailey starts this play with his positioning, and then our jinky Jamaican does the rest. Such a beautiful goal because it was simple in some ways, complex in others, how Bailey managed to even find Ollie Watkins, and obviously the timing of the goal so early in the game is crucial. The second one comes from the same side, and I'll talk about this goal in specific with the late run by Douglas because of the very encouraging details to it. And then the 3-0 goal is the second phase from a corner, which Aduts happened to be rolling on. It has John McGinn's footprints all over it, but again, it comes from our right, their left, which indicates that maybe there was a mismatch or we were specifically picking on that side. Oh, I got a good looky-likey because there were a lot of close-ups of Morgan Gibbs-White in this game, and I'm thinking, who does this guy remind me of? And then it dawned on me, famous Puerto Rican actor of television and film, Luis Guzman, who does unfortunately get typecast a lot as a drug dealer, and I'm not trying to say anything by this, but look at the resemblance. Am I not right here? Is this not a close looky-likey? Minor issue, I'm calling it just a phase for now, but our plus-minus on set pieces, both attacking and defending-wise, has taken a bit of a hit recently. By my calculations, we're now at a slender +1, and you definitely want to be on the plus side of the ledger at the end of the season, but given how much time and effort and innovation we commit to dead ball situations, I think you'd want that total to be a lot wider, and there is no question that the entire tone of the game turned on the stroke of halftime by conceding a goal from a corner. I mean, the difference mentality-wise going in at 3-0 is completely different than 3-1, and you could see that at the beginning of the second half. I just wonder if the discussion within the technical circles is on buttoning up not just the defensive set-piece duties, but just defensive play in general. Like, for me, we have dried up a lot in our offensive output from the dead ball situations, but our open play football is just so good. It's almost as if we don't really need the odd corner or free kick goal, which has seemed to eluded us. Defensively, however, it seems like the goals that teams are scoring from the dead ball are giving them a lifeline. You think about the 1-0 goal, Manchester United. There was the 3-0 goal at home to Chelsea in the FA Cup. Even the goal here just before halftime, it gave some belief. And with a threadbare squad at the moment and with the demanding run-in that we're facing, I think defensively, if we are more difficult to break down and score against, that'll probably help us in the long run. Amusing and slightly interesting moment in the 33rd minute when Unai Emery appeared to have a right go at Luca Dean. Now, the score is 2-0 at this point, and the manager is having a go at one of his substitutes. Unai said afterwards, I was just imparting some tactical advice, something that happened to Alex Moreno and sending it to Luca Dean, but The reaction of Dean is like incredulous. He's like, who, me? You're talking to me right now? I was actually surprised at the level of back talk. But when you talk about a manager who is constantly demanding even of his substitutes, well, here's another prime example. Big issue number 3, mastery mindset. In coaching circles, there is this cultural approach to team building called the mastery motivational climate, which is free of ego or that blame culture. And ideally, what you're trying to do is you're giving the players the psychological safety to go out and just focus on the game itself. And when you get to a stage that some people call free flow, you are so in tune with the game and your teammates that sometimes the football feels automatic to the point of being telepathic. And that's how it felt in the early stages of that first half on Saturday. And yes, Unai Emery's tactical preparations and the level of detail he provides is critical because that helps provide something called automation, where decisions are automatic based on routine and repetition. But it does feel to me in looking at it that the players genuinely care for each other. And Unai Emery does talk about this family feel within the club. So for the 1307th time this season, let's laud the leadership of Unai Emery. I alluded to the exchange with Luca Dean a moment ago. Was that a respecting the opponent issue? Was that a tactical issue? Either way, what he is cultivating is a demanding next man up mindset. And I said last week how refreshing it was to have a manager that does not make excuses about the injuries that he has within his squad. In fact, he talks about how those players are all still around and contributing, or how he empathizes with how difficult long-term injuries are for the player. Now we have a situation where Pau Torres is withdrawn at halftime, whether that's precautionary or something much more worrisome. It was good to see him sitting on the bench. And we turn to a player who I would have wagered would never play for Aston Villa again. In fact, Unai Emery invited him to leave during the January transfer window, and apparently he had 3 legitimate offers from championship teams to join them, and he refused all of them, which I found very strange. I mean, you'd think Callum Chambers would be desperate to revive his career. Maybe it's a blessing he said no. So there he was, making his first appearance, if I'm not mistaken, since the disastrous outing at Legia Warsaw. And he didn't look great on the 3-2 goal, but neither did Matt Cash, who kept everybody onside. I think the goal could have been stopped at the source outside the penalty area. But can you really be that critical with a guy who has been so far away from the first team? Because after that, he looked very composed, very confident. He wasn't hiding. He was demanding the ball. He was available. And imagine what that does for his confidence, for the confidence in his teammates in him, and also the technical staff's confidence in him. It seems to me that it's slightly different for the younger players who Unai Emery is challenging to prove week in and week out they deserve to take minutes away from an established pro. And we know lots of managers with a threadbare squad that would have chucked in a kid a lot sooner than Unai Emery has done. But this is a different way of doing things. It's a no-excuse culture. It's a winning culture. Nothing is handed to anybody easily, and it also proves Emery's faith in his first-team regulars, but also his staff, who give him the load management information or help with nutritional requirements to get players through 3-game weeks. Big issue number 2, monstrous McGinn. I say this often that we really need to relish and savor what is happening right now, because I believe we are seeing a team of emerging, and I use this term very carefully because it gets used a lot, but club legends. I mean, you think about Emi Martinez, his exploits for the club and, of course, his country. And really, he's now just silverware away. But I think because of his personality and everything else, right now, you could say he's getting right up there with Rimmer, Spink, and Bosnich. You could probably say the same about Douglas Luiz, too. How many games has he played in a Villa shirt already in his young life? He had his breakout year, arguably last year, and now he's just built on that and is having a career year. So again, the only thing missing are trophies and some international recognition. And surely that can't be that far away, can it? But undoubtedly, the most likely current player to one day have a bronze statue outside Villa Park, and they'll need extra bronze just for his backside, is of course our beloved Meatball. We know how competitive he is. That's his edge. Unai Emery talks about it all the time, but he also scored the playoff final winner. He's our captain, and he had to survive a little bit of adversity around that decision at the beginning of last season because it was a controversial one at the time. And I put my hand up. I was one of many who wondered, could John McGinn turn into the exact player that he's showing us today? And the reason he is one thing, it's mentality. You have to have a willingness to learn, grow, adapt, take on board information, and then, of course, to lead. And he is doing all of those things right now. Just this season, McGinn's been asked to play wide at times. Out of possession, he still comes in field narrow, which is how Unai Emery wants to play. Then he's played in the pocket as a number 10 behind Ollie Watkins very effectively at times, similar to how he plays for Scotland. Along comes Boubacar Kamara's injury, and now he's been asked to play as an 8, but with some 6 sensibilities. And honestly, watching him on Saturday, you would have thought he'd been playing that position all season long. Okay, there's going to be sterner tests for both McGinn and Villa in the weeks to come. Every Premier League squad has some dynamic central midfielders in their ranks, but he is so good at taking up spaces, and he's adapted to this position so well quickly. He shows he's on the correct half-turn body position so he can accept the ball but still see most of the park. And then with that lower body strength and that big bum of his, he can leverage himself and wriggle out of things. Sometimes he gets caught in possession and gets dispossessed in these moments. Not on Saturday. 0 dispossessions. He completed 93% of his passes. He had 4 clearances, 3 recoveries, won all 3 of his tackles, and he assisted on the Douglas Luiz goal. That is a fantastic two-way performance for arguably a man-of-the-match candidate. Would have been hard to choose on Saturday, which is a very good sign for us. And John McGinn will undoubtedly be an all-timer for our club in the future. Just before we get to the number 1 issue of the Forest game, 24/7 Services is just rocking it right now, and I deeply appreciate those of you who have rung up Paul and had 24/7 come over and do some work for you. And I believe that has as much to do with the fact that Paul is a hardcore Villa fan, as are much of his crew, with the quality of the quote and service that you get in the end. And that's why I knew this would be a great sponsorship, because the Villa family is wide and loyal and dedicated. And that's why this relationship works so well. And by the way, 24/7 has some really big contracts with big companies like Network Rail and the network of co-ops across the country, like this one, which just installed an anti-theft system. Yes, they do that as well. We also call this a Blues fan barricade. It's a Blues fan barricade. So if you have a Blues fan problem at your business, an infestation, if you will, make sure you call 24/7 right away and get that sorted out. And you can do that directly from their spanky new website. And the number 1 big issue that defined Villa 4, Forest 2, confidence and composure. Here again, we have another issue that has nothing to do with tactics or technical application by the players, but instead the mentality of the players. And for me, I could see right from the opening kickoff with the body language, the successful completion of passes or dribbles, or the length of time that we controlled the football, confidence in our players. Keeping in mind, we're coming off 3 straight losses at Villa Park, something internally they will have wanted to get right. And yes, okay, Forest hasn't been great away from home, but they were coming off a very credible 2-0 win over West Ham, and they seem to have a little bit of a bounce since Nuno arrived. Now, I said after the Manchester United loss that we had this habit in that game of almost snatching at things, like there was an element of hastiness to our play when we legitimately had the better of the chances and moments in that game. So you fast forward to now, and on the crucial 2-0 goal, a wonderful example of composure shown by Jacob Ramsey, who has been criticized since he's returned from injury. But here, and I wonder, does he hear a shout from Douglas Luiz? Or is this just familiarity with the circumstance based on what happens in training? Or is it flat out game IQ? No matter what is behind it, he shows composure and that beat, and this goal would not happen without that. I just want to dovetail quickly on this moment in isolation because it's becoming apparent to me that we are purposefully attacking this specific area of the penalty box, something Manchester City does an awful lot because of a very simple reason. Defenders and a goalkeeper cannot watch both the ball and the late runners coming in and around the spot at the same time. You need technical players and you need composure. But we have those players. Leon Bailey is proving it. You have Diaby, Tielemans, you have Jacob Ramsey, Ollie Watkins, sometimes even John McGinn and Douglas Luiz. And when you drive the ball into this region, this specific area of the box, you're either going to end up with a goal, a corner, maybe a penalty, more often than not. And when you watch the 1-0 goal, which is beautiful from Bailey, this is calm and composure. I mean, he sees the needle hole and then threads it. But look at all the eyes of the defenders. Every single one of them and the goalkeepers are on the ball. Not one person is looking at the eventual goal scorer, Ollie Watkins, because they physically can't. Back to the issue at hand, our manager has demanded of his players control of games, not allowing transitional moments, back and forth open games, because those are more difficult to manage and control. And lo and behold, I think the players have responded and fulfilled that request, because have we really at any point over the last couple of weeks looked stretched the way we were against Chelsea, Newcastle, or the one that kind of started it all, the trip to Old Trafford on Boxing Day? So in essence, that means we have responded and adjusted to the adjustments that other teams have employed specifically against Villa. Be honest now. How were you feeling at the start of the second half when it was suddenly 3-2? We had Callum Chambers playing alongside Clement Longley and what looked like a totally rejuvenated Nottingham Forest team coming out from the halftime break. I'll admit, I was irritated, I was nervous, I was worried, and yes, I even thought about the possibility of us chucking away a 3-0 lead at home when we dominated in that first half, because supporters are human, we're manic, and we automatically default to the worst case scenario first. So how do the players feel? Do they pick up on that angst in the crowd? Of course they do. But you know what? On this day, they didn't. They maintained their composure. And Unai Emery talks all the time about how we need the supporters. The supporters drive us. We hopefully transmit our energy to them, but that the supporters have to adopt a winning mentality. From everybody that reached out after the game, they said that Villa Park was incredible atmosphere-wise, supportive and not toxic. And yes, there were a couple of scares even at 3-2. But did you ever feel like we lost control of the match, or were recklessly going and trying to chase a fourth goal, or were sitting deep and inviting problems? Because I didn't. And you know what? We always felt like, to me, we were going to get the next goal, and it should have probably come a little bit earlier. Youri Tielemans would love to have this one back, but he was excellent on the day with and without the ball. And sure enough, that fourth goal came, and the whole tone of it all came down to control and confidence. And this is the biggest difference between this era under Unai Emery and the Gerrard or even Dean Smith eras, where it always felt at times like we were vulnerable to capitulation. Back on track at Villa Park as the fans leave with that satisfied, let's celebrate with a pint or 9 look, including those kids over there. I would love to see us turn the set piece plus minus well in our favor before the year is over. Ollie Watkins is now even with Mo Salah for goal involvements in the Premier League, which is incredible. Our first half goals for and against spread continues to widen, and scoring first has been the charm so many times. Add 3 more points against the bottom 6 as well. Now for a tricky trip to the Kenny, where away supporters are going to have to navigate through people's backyards to get to their seats. And like I said before the Sheffield United trip, I don't like games like this because the respective table positions would indicate that we are expected to win this game, and that just is not how it works. And I now believe that Rob Edwards' Luton is, of the newly promoted teams currently in the relegation zone, the most likely to avoid the drop. And you know their shtick. It's hit on the counter, on the break, and from set pieces, something we didn't deal with very well on Saturday, and actually for the last few weeks. It's all about control again. And my confidence level going into this game will be much higher depending on Pau Torres's availability. We're now also into a Saturday, Thursday, Sunday routine right up until the break, and that is going to test our squad. Please come back soon, Ezri Konsa and Diego Carlos. And to put an exclamation point on our triumph Saturday was the result at Old Trafford, where Fulham scored late to beat Man United 2-1. You know, beating the Cottagers relatively comfortably is not for everybody. So that makes the gap between us, the one we should be watching, now 8 points, and the goal difference is 21, and looks like it's widening for me. This weekend, we're at Luton on Saturday. Manchester United is crosstown at City on Sunday. It could really be almost a defining weekend. The only thing keeping the Red Devils in the Champions League hunt at this stage is the 2 wins against us. Spring's in the air, too, because the next time we convene, it will be March. Until then, be well. And as always, up the mighty Villa.